Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Eardley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing, breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business. Hello everybody, it's Catherine. I am your host, Catherine Eardley, as well as the founder of the Resilient Retail Club, which is my membership group for product businesses. You can find out more at resilientretailclub.com. We are on to episode number 58 of the Resilient Retail Game Plan. And today's episode, I'm welcoming Matt Hopkins. He is the managing director of the Great British Exchange, which is a company that has a long history of backing small and independent brands and helping them get placements, for example, pop-ups in big retailers. So we talk about all kinds of things in this episode. We really explore some of Matt's experience and in the industry and how he's seen the perception towards British and local brands changing over the years, as well as exploring a little bit of that relationship between big retailers and small retailers and what it adds to both of them to be working together. Hi, Matt. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Catherine. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for being here. Do you want to kick us off by telling us a little bit about yourself and the Great British Exchange?
Yeah, so I founded the business in 2014, having spent many years working with some fairly big, well-known household brands and designing and developing products for them. And I'd gone on a journey to source some British-made products for a particular brand. On that journey, I unearthed and met with literally hundreds of really, really cool, innovative and creative British, small to medium-sized British brands who were in part struggling to get their products to market or to sort of make their voice heard or to stand out from the crowd. So I kind of founded the Great British Exchange really to act as a conduit to help those small brands reach the retail market.
Brilliant. So you have the relationship then effectively with some of the bigger retailers. So John Lewis, for example, and then you have a series of pop-up events where people can get a space effectively in a big retailer.
Yeah, that's right. So there's really sort of two sides of our business when it comes to the small to medium-sized brands. One is a traditional kind of wholesale business, and the other, as you quite rightly say, is the pop-up, which is really, really exciting and growing massively at the moment. And it's a great platform for the small to medium-sized businesses to actually have a space in a famous high street retailer like John Lewis.
Yeah.
And they can, engage with the customers, which is really, really important, and really get first-hand feedback. There's ready-made footfall there, obviously.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they're making money.
So when you were meeting these brands, then you said that they were really struggling to get into these, particularly into these bigger retailers. So do you think that was often mostly to do with just not having the relationship?
I think it's very difficult for, a small brand, even if it's a growing brand, to unless they've already got an established relationship with a retailer, to sort of stand out, because there's so many.
Right.
If you think about a retailer like John Lewis, they're constantly getting bombarded by suppliers in various different. So unless you've got something that's really different and unique, and obviously for a business like John Lewis, it's difficult for them to set up a new supplier when it's kind of a bit of an unknown, and they don't necessarily aren't going to generate a certain level of revenue for them, et cetera, et cetera. So it is quite difficult for a small brand to get into these bigger high street stores.
And so, no, I think that's a great point. And so, effectively, what they're doing is you're kind of becoming the middle person where they know you, they've worked with you, they've had great experiences in the past. So then, if you're kind of presenting to them, these are the brands that we're going to, put forward, then they know that it kind of eliminates the need for them to have to deal with them directly, and they know that they can kind of trust your judgment.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got somewhere in the order of between 8 and 10,000 small brands that we work with at the moment, and that's growing quickly. But some of those brands have gone on to do fantastically well. So in the traditional wholesale sense, then obviously there's, as you say, there's a selection process. There's a very much an element of trust involved, and it's and so on. Whereas the pop-up is almost a very low or no risk for the retailer. But there is a very stringent selection process that goes, approval process that happens along the way. And that's just to make sure that, we're not putting a brand in there that might kind of cannibalize sales of an existing product that's very similar or doesn't really fit or hasn't got the right kind of ethics or ethos behind it. So there's a filtering process that obviously happens up front.
Sure. I wanted to ask you a question specifically about British brands, because it's really interesting what you're saying. So in 2014, you were specifically looking for British brands, and you came across these smaller brands that maybe didn't have access to the market, and that was why you created the Great British Exchange. But how do you think the sort of whole perception around made in the UK, British brands, how do you think that shifted over, say, the last 5 years or really since you started the business?
I think that the perception has shifted tremendously. And I think in some ways, the perception might have been kind of a bit stuffy, a bit kind of twee, and perhaps a little bit overpriced in some ways. Mm-hmm. Whereas actually now I think there's a real move towards really kind of diverse, innovative, creative, but equally good quality products. And I think the consumer can see that.
Absolutely. And it seems like at the moment, a lot of the research that I read, a lot of the retail experts that I speak to, everyone's recognizing that there's been this real shift towards supporting small and independent brands. So from your perspective, having been in this industry for a while and seeing it from both sides, from the big retailers side and also from the small brand side, what's your sense of why now is such a sort of fertile time, if you like, for small and independent brands?
Consumers are very savvy, and I think consumers know where to go for mass-produced products at a very, very achievable price or accessible.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas more, let's say, giftable or more kind of self-treat products are concerned, I think there's a real heart to kind of uniqueness, exclusive, handmade things with real kind of character and you just don't find everywhere,
Yeah.
So I think we've got a very savvy consumer, and obviously, things like Brexit and all of those kinds of things do actually really kind of, I think, support this movement towards British and local and so on.
When we were chatting beforehand, you mentioned that you'd really noticed this sort of shift to localism, and you said it had started in the food sector in particular.
Yeah, well, I first started to see this, Catherine, in the recession.
Right.
So typically in a recession, you see a massive increase in knitwear, men grow beards.
Yeah.
And I really started to see, and particularly in food to begin with.
Yeah.
I mentioned like jams and juices and various other different things really starting to come through. There was a real kind of demand for this nostalgic localism coming through. Obviously, as time's gone on, and we've obviously had the business now for knocking on 8 years, but before that, we've seen that transcend into homewares, gifting, fashion, etc., and it's just gone from strength to strength.
I think there's a couple of things with this sort of shop local, shop independent. I think partly the customer now feels that they're doing something good when they shop with a small business, they shop locally, or they support an independent brand. So I think that partly for me, I think it's become popular because the customers actually feels that it says something positive about them, which is obviously a big driver of behavior. But it's really interesting. So it's I guess it's that, but it's also then, as you said, that kind of almost comfort blanket feeling. If you, oh, it's locally made. So then over the last sort of, as you said, 8 years, you've just seen it increase, that more and more people want more things that kind of reflect that slight coziness, like you say, like the knitwear, the kind of, like reassuring.
I think it's certainly, there's an element of beyond patriotism. It's the local. It's having an understanding that there are these massive factories out there churning out all of this stuff, but actually there's, where I think in some cases, not all, in some cases, the individuality, the design, it all kind of, it gets eroded, whereas you see a real personality and passion. And again, particularly where people are looking for great quality or for something as a gift or something that's different, and finding these things that are, not handmade, but, like small production is, and we've seen as a business, we saw the explosion in gin.
Right. Yes.
And which is a really kind of good example of, to begin with, there was a few distilleries, I won't mention any because it's not fair, and now almost every town and village in the country's got its own kind of distillery churning out gin. And
beer as well, same thing with beer, right?
Yeah, beer, craft, and that's craft foods. And there's so many, a street food, all of this kind of stuff it goes back to experiential. It's all about experience. And I think that's one of the reasons why we work so closely with people like John Lewis, where they really want to deliver and do so well in bringing that experiential piece of the shopping experience to the consumer, and bringing and we've got some amazing brands that we work with who go in and absolutely are engaging with customers in store. And, it becomes a really, and, it's quite interesting when you go in and you see a business owner who's there introducing their, whatever it is, a skincare brand or a gin or whatever it might be, or chocolate, and tasting and sampling and talking to the person who's actually behind the brand. More often than not, they'll get a sale.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's that story, isn't it? And it's also almost like you can then gift the story to the person you give it to. You don't just say, here's a bottle of gin. You say, oh, there's this bottle of gin, and I met the person who distills it, and they were telling me how they select everything that goes into it, and the meaning behind the packaging. And I think that you're right, just there's something so pleasing about that, to be able to not just give someone a physical gift, but give them a story too.
That's such an enormous part of it. I think, we've kind of sort of hit the nail on the head there, where, if I'm coming around to your house because it's your birthday and I pick you something from a famous online retailer that, where I've got it from. But if I'm going to deliver the story about the gin and where the junipers are grown and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff.
For sure.
It makes the whole experience more engaging.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I was talking to a client of mine who makes knitwear, and their jumpers are finished with a hand finished using a teasel, a real teasel from Scotland. And I was just like, this is incredible. It's such an amazing, there's all these fascinating stories that it's not the same experience as if you buy, a jumper from the high street, as much as, that has its place as well. So it's really fascinating. So we talked a little bit about then the need for experiential retail, that need to bring the sort of surprise and delight, I suppose, as well for the customers, and the sense of discovery that you walk into a big chain and you have all of these great local businesses that you just didn't even know necessarily existed until you saw them there. So do you think that's kind of the main driver then behind, I'm always fascinated by this interplay between big retailers and small retailers, because I had 17 years experience in big retailers, and now I work exclusively with small and independent. So I always find it really fascinating to sort of see how the two interact and what happens when they come together, like with the pop-up. So do you feel like then for the bigger retailers, this is part of them offering that experience to the customers, and also because they know that, they're all very, very commercial, so they know that's what the customer's looking for? Yeah.
And that's precisely the arena that the Great British Exchange plays in. Mm-hmm. So we effectively bridge that gap. going back to what I was saying earlier about, my background in big, well-known brands. And, that's quite easy to walk into the door to a major retailer and go, hey, I'm working for X, Y, and Z. And obviously it's very well known, but for those smaller brands, it's very difficult to try and get a foot in the door. But I think where the retailers are looking for our help is to provide them with the uniqueness. The exclusivity is a big thing as well, of course, because retailers often competing with each other, and they want a differentiation between them and the competition.
Right.
So we're able to then provide a wide variety of products. We're obviously able to, those things are exclusive in some cases and so on. So I think for the larger retailer, it is getting the uniqueness, the variety, the exclusivity. Those are the key things that they're looking for, as well as the experiential piece.
So talk to me a little bit then from the brand perspective, the people who take part in the pop-ups. What have you seen their experience be, and what do you really see as the kind of benefit to them for taking part in these?
Well, the major thing for taking part is the exposure. The being able to get your brand in a major retailer, take advantage of the footfall, the established footfall that's already there, and make money at the same time is a win-win-win, really. We've seen some amazing successes with very many of our brands, not even just whilst they're in the store,
right,
but for a time afterwards, because you know what these things are like. The more you put in, the more you get out. And I think when we've seen the brands really engaging with the customers in the pop-up, but also on their social media and really kind of connecting with their customer base to let them know what's going on, the follow-up afterwards, we've seen, lots of these brands' sales increase enormously on their own websites for some significant time afterwards. So it's a whole package, really. It's, obviously it's the experience. The other thing, Catherine, that we've heard a lot about is for a brand to be able to actually talk to the customer, massive first-hand feedback, is, and one of the things that obviously met and talked to hundreds of small brands. It's so important for them to understand who their customer is, who their target market is, and make sure that they are focused on that. And obviously, whilst they're in the pop-up environment, they can do that. They can extract all the information, not just selling, asking questions. So it's a two-way street.
With lockdown and with not being able to be face-to-face with customers, for a lot of people, they found it really hard because it is that feedback loop, as you say, that it's one thing to put something up on the website and people buy it, which is great, fantastic, we all love that. But then when you're actually talking to somebody face-to-face and they're explaining how they're going to use your product or who they're purchasing it for, or maybe where they've thought about buying previously. And it's funny, when I worked for big retailers, we'd always ask, who else's bags, for example, are they carrying when they come into the store? And it's something as simple as that means that you actually get a really good understanding of how your customer shops and what they're thinking about, which is so valuable to you, as well as to get that input. So yeah, I can totally see that face-to-face. I was also wondering as well, do you find that people feel like almost like the legitimacy of being in a big retailer also really helps if you're a small brand trying to kind of break through and stand out?
Oh, enormously. I mean, once a brand goes through the approval process and is successful, I think the team, the pop-up team, tend to get them bombarded by the brand saying, when can we announce?
Yes.
And it's almost like, and it is a kudos thing, it really is. And for a brand to be able to say, even though it's a pop-up, to be able to say, look, we're appearing in John Lewis, another retailer, it's a massive thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I always say to brands, people buy your excitement. So if you show up on social media and you're all excited about this, you've got this pop-up going on, or, you're even showing your preparation and things like that, then I think that can also have that galvanizing effect, like the fact that you're excited and there's something interesting and exciting to share about, and very visual as well. It's great social media content to show actually what's going on and your setup and that kind of thing. I think it's really exciting.
there's, as well as John Lewis, there are other retailers that we work with and are doing more. So it's a really exciting time for brands to get involved with the GBE. We bring more retailers on board. We're looking at other kind of pop-up environments as well.
Right.
I don't want to say too much because I think kind of unfolding, but it's not just it's not just necessarily exclusively into retail. There are lots of other exciting places that we're looking at and talking to at the moment. So I would encourage people to get in touch with the team.
Okay, absolutely. And I think the key thing there as well is that, that often we hear these things bandied around a lot about, the high street's dead or people aren't shopping physically anymore. But absolutely what you're talking about, that excitement, the discovery, the experience, that is what people are coming out for, right? So I think that we're going to see a lot of interest in, especially as we run into Christmas for sure, and people still coming, but coming if there's a reason to come and something exciting to see, which obviously a small local brand is definitely fits in that category.
You only have to look at things like Christmas markets to see just how people migrate to those kinds of places because of the uniqueness, because they know they're not going to be able to get it on, a famous online retailer.
Yes.
So actually going there and it goes all the way back to the thing that we talked about earlier about passing on that story, those unique and interesting items, and engaging with the brand. I think that's where it all kind of emanates from.
People buy from people, they buy stories, and they buy brands that fit their values and their beliefs. So the more you can share that, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's just about passing through that personality and that character and the uniqueness of these brands and products. And often we see so many, and again, I don't want to list them out, but the packaging design, the thought, the attention to detail that goes into presentation of the brands is unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree. So thoughtful and well thought through. So if someone's listening to the podcast, obviously we know they can get in touch with you and have a chat about the opportunities. But I'd just love to finish off by just kind of asking you if there are any common themes that you can pull out from the brands that you think have done really well. Are there any common themes that people could maybe sort of think about for their own business in around which brands do really well, what customers are looking for, or what some of the things might be that you encourage people to think about before they would take part in a pop-up?
Yeah, I think in terms of just as a general point, just kind of pulling some of our things that we've talked about together, I think knowing your customer, knowing your target market is important. Having researched, I can't emphasize enough, research your target market, just absolutely know who your customer is. Because it may be that, a John Lewis customer, a Phoenix customer, whatever, they are not your target market necessarily.
Right.
But understanding your pricing architecture is very important, because you might have the most beautiful products in the world, but if you flip over the price tag and it's £500, then no one's going to buy it. Equally, as we've said before, underpricing your products can be equally as damaging. And making it sustainable is also important. But I think, just from what I've seen, I think presentation's critical. I think being able to, in a pop-up environment, we've seen it before where if a business owner or someone representing the brand's just sat there playing on the phone and not engaging with the customers, it's not going to help.
Yeah.
So be proactive, really get in front of the customers, not overtly, but, rugby tackling people in the store or anything like that. But really, really engaging with people, really understand what people are looking for, and preparation in terms of before you kind of come into the pop-up, doing your marketing, making sure that everyone's aware, etc. So yeah, I think it's just preparation, research, and execution really are the key things.
Love that. Nice and simple. Preparation, research, execution. And big shout out for the pricing. It's one of my big themes. I often talk about knowing your pricing, knowing your customer for sure, making sure that you are really tuned into who they are, and making sure it's right for you. Well, thank you so much, Matt. Do you want to just tell us a little bit more about where people can go to find out more about you?
If you head over to the website, which is popup.thegbexchange.com, or email the team. We've got a great team and a really diligent and will really help you with any of the questions that you might have. If you email the team at info@thegbexchange.com, or alternatively, you can give the office a call and the team there will be, I'm sure, delighted to help.
Excellent. And we will put all of that in the show notes as well. So if you are interested, you can click on the link below. So thank you so much. And I'm feeling optimistic about Christmas. I'm sure you are too, but I think it's going to be a good one, especially for small brands, as the customer gets refocused in on their Christmas purchasing.
Yeah, I think I think this Christmas is going to be a big one. So yeah,
I think
absolutely.
so too. Okay, we're in agreement. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and good luck for the rest of the year.
Thanks ever so much, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you so much to Matt for this episode. I hope you enjoyed our discussion as much as I did. I thought it was really fascinating to dig a little bit deeper into the relationship, as something I'm always interested in seeing that relationship between how big retailers and small retailers can work together and how it can be beneficial for both of them. If you want to find out more about the Great British Exchange, then the links are in the show notes. So do go check them out. If you have a moment and you can take a second out of your busy day to rate and review the podcast in iTunes, it makes a huge difference to me. And I appreciate every single person who takes the time to do so. So thank you so much. As always, why not hop over to Instagram at Resilient Retail Club, say hi, tell me what you thought of the episode, or why not share a screenshot of where you are, where you're listening in. I always love to see where you are. And of course, if you are interested in joining the Resilient Retail Club, we do have an exclusive offer for podcast listeners, which is £15 off your first month with the code 1515podcast. So why not, again, go to the link in the show notes to take advantage of that offer. See you next week. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then I invite you to check out resilientretailclub.com. The Resilient Retail Club is the membership for anyone wanting to start, grow, or scale a profitable product business. No more trawling Google trying to find the answers to your questions or wading through general business advice that speaks mainly to service-based businesses. Whether you're still at the idea stage or you've been going for a while but want to get more focused and organised when it comes to your business, the Resilient Retail Club is the place for you. With a library of courses tailored to creative product businesses, several live sessions a month, and a supportive and active community, the Resilient Retail Club is the perfect membership to help you hit your goals faster. Check it out at resilientretailclub.com.